for coming to our panel session here. I think we can jump off with some brief introductions. Patrick, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi everybody, my name is Patrick Brown. I'm the Director of Adult Student Attainment at Michigan College Access Network, also known as MCAN. My kind of last 10 years is spent in the adult learning space and how we can provide opportunities for additional education and training for adults that positively impacts their families and creates that generational opportunity that we're all thinking about.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Straza. I'm the director of the Capillary College Access Network, but I also wear another hat at United Way of South Central Michigan. I lead our policy advocacy team and our volunteer center, so lots of hats.
Thanks, Michelle. Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Grodsky. I'm with Oakland Livingston Human Service Agency, otherwise known as OLSA, a community action agency. We are one of 27 community action agencies in the state of Michigan, and we're part of a 1,400 community action agency network in the United States. And I also wear another hat as a steering committee member for the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition, and we advocate other relatives' children. And a lot of them are aunts and uncles, parenting nieces and nephews, great-grandparents and grandparents raising grandchildren.
Thanks, Lisa. You did a really good job enunciating all of those organizations. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. Laura?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Lefevre. I'm the Director of Community Partnerships and Projects at the Children's Center in Detroit. I'm slowing down the enunciate as well. We are a specialized behavioral health agency in Detroit, and what that means is that we service children 0 to 21 for an array of behavioral health, mental health challenges. We are also a child welfare agency, so we foster, license, and work to have children find their forever home. And with that, to provide the additional supports that children and families need, we have one of the 11 recognized family resource centers in the state through Children's Trust Michigan. So that we're working as a primary prevention partner, because if we can work to help keep children out of child welfare, reduce child abuse and neglect, the world will be a much better place.
Well, thank you, Laura. And my name's Tyler Hunty. I am the CEO of Early Learning Company. We're a child care provider based out of Big Rapids, Michigan. We're soon to have 7 locations. We'll be opening one up in 2 weeks, so we've been busy with that, if anybody's gone through the licensing process. But I'm also the president of the Michigan Child Care Provider Collective, which is a group of providers advocating for early education in the state of Michigan. In this panel, we're talking about, how you can become a better advocate for, whatever your space is in the state of Michigan and also federally. As you can see, our panel is comprised of people with several different backgrounds and specialize in different areas. So if you have any questions on the way, this is a small room. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask anything. But we'll go ahead and get it kicked off, and the panelists just feel free to jump in and answer a question as you see fit. We can go right down the line if you'd like, but feel free to answer as you like. So the first being, what prompted you to start advocating for policy change? Patrick, would you like to kick it off?
Sure. I would say that I think at first for me, I didn't realize that I was an advocate, right? It seems like a title like that you have to own, or that it's prepared for someone who has gone to school and gone through policy like Michelle has, but she's also just an advocate in her life too. But I realized very quickly as I entered the professional space that if there's something that I cared about and I have a passion for, and I want to see a change be made better or enhanced for more people, then I'm an advocate. And so it became, I kind of owned that a little bit. It became more natural for me to be like, yes, I'm an advocate. And I would say that to all of you is that you are an advocate. You might not feel like an advocate some days. It might seem difficult. It might be a title that you feel like you're not prepared for, but if there's something that you have a passion for, you are. So I would say I started with not knowing that I was an advocate, and then kind of fell into it, if you will, or found that. And for me, that was very organic, and that has been a skill that I've tried to develop over time.
Great answer.
I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
So first I wanna just acknowledge my dear, dear friend, Michelle Court.
Yes.
Yes.
She and I literally grew up together. We share a name, but we also shared a profession. And we came to this work fresh out of grad school. We both studied sort of related policy work. She more on the social work side. I am actually a public policy practitioner. And we learned from the best mentors in town. And we were part of I consider the golden age of child advocacy in Michigan, when we had organizations that were paid solely to do children's advocacy. That doesn't really exist a whole lot anymore. Michigan's Children's kind of the exception to that, but I think about her all the time, and I always ask the question, not what would Jesus do, but what would Michelle do? And she would say this, more of this, and we need to keep planting seeds like Danielle was talking about this morning, of teaching people how to be advocates, teaching people that they already know everything they need to know to be empowered to speak up for themselves. So, just want to channel her for a second here. So I guess, kind of always knew I wanted to do this. I'm one of those unusual people. But went to school specifically to study public policy at Michigan State, if there's any James Madison folks in the room. I originally thought I was gonna go to DC, work on the Hill, and work at the Children's Defense Fund, if any of you are familiar with CDF. Mary Ray Edelman's one of my heroes. And that didn't work out that particular summer, so I stayed here in town and ended up working for an organization called Children's Charter of the Courts, where I learned how to be an advocate from Mike Foley and some other, Lisa Cation, some other folks, and have just carried that with me through the rest of my career. So if you ask me to identify myself, I say first a mom, second a child advocate, third a nonprofit executive. So that's just who I am and how I want to be known on my tombstone. Anyway, thank you.
Lisa?
So I will tell you that, like Patrick shared, I didn't know I was an advocate, but it started at a very early age in elementary school. I did not realize that by welcoming the new kid that arrived to our school who was afraid and scared and didn't know the ropes and the layout of the land and stuff, I just naturally just slipped in, sat next to people who didn't have anybody to sit with at lunch and things like that. And anytime that they express some sort of concern and they were afraid, some teacher told me I was tattling once, but I was not tattling on anything. I was advocating for somebody's well-being, because I grew up in the 70s and, bullying was, it was really dangerous back then. And so, but professionally, I work every day with people who don't realize that they have a voice that should be and could be heard. And, so I started asking questions on their behalf and inquiring about some of their unmet practical needs, and I was finding service gaps everywhere. And so that led me to come to Lansing on an annual basis for some cause or another to speak up and share the stories of people who couldn't be here. We live in Michigan and I'm closer to the Motor City, but not everyone in metropolitan Detroit has access to a vehicle, and they can't get here. And so I feel like I am the messenger for those individuals that have some really brilliant ideas and legitimate concerns, and if they can't be here to speak, then I like to bring their message on their behalf.
Thank you, Lisa. Laura?
Wow, I'm trying to figure out what to add because each of your stories you really resonate with me. And I'll start with, many moons ago, I was a case manager in our home-based program at the Children's Center. And I found myself in a position of really looking at, we have children who have mental health challenges, behavioral health challenges, and who are shunned at every door they were walking in. So school, there was an issue with the school. IEPs were not being followed. 504 plans were not being followed. Kicked out of school, mom's getting a call every single day and no one's following the plan and saying, hey, hold on, this is illegal. There's things, so advocating for children based upon their mental health needs, creating spaces where we created a summer camp, because when I was a young case manager, I'd refer my kiddos to camp and they would either be denied or kicked out because they had a behavioral health problem. And I'm like, well, everyone deserves an opportunity to go to camp. I'll create our own. And so some 25 years later, it's still going strong. We'll have camp going on in July because, everyone deserves a seat at the table. And, our parents, some of us are, many parents are raised, or we think that this person is in a position of authority. So if they say no, I have to follow it. And it's, I don't really believe in no all the time, especially when it feels unjust to our children and our youth who deserve a seat at the table regardless of ability. And that not only for our behavioral health children, but for our children who are on the autism spectrum, who are developmentally disabled. Despite some popular belief in the government right now is that our children are very successful. That label, that's just the label, that doesn't define who they are. So the advocacy behind that is so important in creating the awareness.
Thank you. So I'll briefly share my story. My advocacy journey was it was a little more intentional. I never expected to be in the childcare space. My mom, when I was growing up, had an in-home childcare center in our house. So all around me, and I was like, okay, I think that's enough of the daycare kids for me. But then, so I moved, we grew up on the west side of the state. I moved down to Metro Detroit after college for work, and that perspective shifted when I had my first son. And I knew I wanted to be in business and I wanted to have a positive impact. I was in a sales position where, it wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted, out of my career. So I came home and, with the goal of providing high quality early education to the rural communities that I grew up in. And I went to the first ever Capitol Day. I think that was put on by Think Babies. It was 3 years ago. And the state, MyLeap or Laura, whatever the group was back then, I think it was pre-MyLeap, stood up there, and this was right after COVID. And they had kind of jacked up the subsidy rates, which our subsidy, we have a pretty high subsidized population in our rural communities. And, the last decrease was coming, and it was gonna be 21%. And they stood up there and they're like, we're not gonna let this happen, we have your back. And I said, I believed it. Well, lo and behold, a few months later, it did happen. And it was unbelievably painful for our business to absorb that and then have to pass that cost along to families and friends in the community that I grew up in. So I don't really remember how it all got started, but we're able to gather together a group of passionate people, Beth being one of them, raise your hand. Beth and Maddie with Michigan's Children in the back, and Ken Rubel. And we started we didn't have a name for it at the time, but we just started a group and said, we need a voice for child care providers in the state. Because there's a lot of organizations that talk about, supporting children and different types of things within the state, but there was nobody advocating for the challenges that the child care providers were taking on every day and telling those stories. So we formed that organization, and a few months ago we finalized a board, and we're legitimate, so that's a very exciting thing, and it's been a heck of a journey, and I'm very grateful for the people that helped us get where we are today. Okay, so that being said, when you're advocating, a lot of times we are developing a relationship with decision makers, right? And those decision makers, more often than not, are legislators, right? Whether it's a House of State, federal, House of Reps, Senator, the governor herself. And it's really important to develop a relationship with those people. So I'm curious from the panel, How do you develop a strong relationship with legislators or influential people to advocate for, whatever area you're passionate about? And we'll just go right back down the line again, Patrick. So I see you're spinning there. You're doing a good job.
So a couple of things come to mind. The first thing I have learned from another great mentor, Michelle Corey, is to do a lot of listening. Policymakers will tell you a lot by their actions and by the things that they ask more about. And if you can do whatever you can to try to answer those questions, not maybe in the moment, but to follow up with them and create that dialogue, that's really important. So I always say these three things. I try to remember three things when I meet a policymaker. One is their name. There's a lot of names floating around, or whoever you're with in the office. The second is if there's something that as you were talking, that piqued their interest. Like maybe they wrote something down, maybe they kind of like their eyebrow went up about something. It's like, oh, that's something that triggered something that they were thinking about. And the last thing is like if they asked a question about something. So their name, their interest, their question. And those three things I know that I can build a relationship off of. Where, your name and where you're from. A lot of times when I go to talk to a policymaker, I will do a little bit of research about where they came from, maybe when they went to school, the community that they're representing, if the organization that I'm a part of, that I'm advocating on behalf, if I know people in that community, it's not a bad thing to name drop every now and then and say, I'm from the community, or I know people that are supporters of this issue in your community, and we work with them very strongly. Or even if there are exemplary examples in their community, in their constituency that you can raise up to them. Did you know that you have an awesome early child care provider in that? Did you know that one of your constituents is the leader of this statewide collaborative for this? Sometimes they know that, sometimes they don't. And so those are kind of the things that I do to try to engage with them. I think it's important to create that small talk because the next time you come back, they'll also remember that and they will continue to build that dialogue back and forth with you. The other thing that I would just add is that sometimes as advocates, we can be a little overwhelming when we come to the room. We've got a lot to say in a very short time, and we really need to take like the pages of things that we want to say and get it down to about a paragraph worth of content. That's about all the attention span that we can get from a lawmaker, right? They've got, if you think about their entire day, they've got 15, 30-minute meetings booked from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. And you are one piece of that. And so whatever you can do to kind of just get in there and say, here's where we're from, this is what we'd like to share with you, this is where you can contact me for more information, or like, this is when I'd like to connect with you next. That's about all that we have time to transmit. But you do that over and over and consistently through different mediums and formats. And then the third thing I would say is you don't always have to meet them in their office. You can corner them in lots of different spaces. A lot of people don't know that lawmakers have coffee hours or set up events in communities, and no one comes. Or one person will come and they've heard from that same person, so they would really love to hear from somebody else about a topic. And lawmakers are just people, policymakers. They have kids, they have car issues, they have insurance problems, they are running late to meetings, or happen to maybe get there early and are buying a coffee in the Starbucks line ahead of you. Kind of being aware of that and not getting scared by the fact that they're this big bad lawmaker, I think can really help you in your advocacy and talking with someone. They are people, yes, they have an elected title and they wear fancy suits or a pin or something like that, but they are normal people, and you're a person that has an issue that is important to raise up to them.
Thank you. And a lot of times your lawmaker will have a Facebook that they'll be posting those coffee hours. I know everyone that I follow, so they make it pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
So thank you, Patrick. Michelle?
So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that it's a lot easier to stalk a legislator now online and learn more about them than it used to be when I started. But it is important to do your homework. But I think more importantly, it's important to develop a relationship. It's like any relationship, right? It takes time, it takes energy, it takes communication, it takes being present, it takes listening, as you said. So, you know, when the election happens, the first thing you do is you send a congratulatory note to them with, throw your card in it and say, hey, this is fantastic news, I can't wait to work with you, right? And then you provide opportunities for engagement, and make sure they're not all negative engagement, although I liken it to say right now that Congressman Barrett probably is not liking my engagement with him. So
He just doesn't know he does. Yeah.
right, exactly. But that means saying thank you. So if they do something positive, you know, send a note of affirmation to them. They'll remember that, just like, you know, you said they'll remember that you asked about their family or whatever. You know, a little gratitude goes a long way. Because they get bombarded by negative people like me at the moment, calling them regularly. But the other thing is, you're an expert, and they're not necessarily an expert. So you have something that they need. You have your expertise. And so just as much as you walk in and say, I need you, you know, Congressman or Representative so-and-so to do this for me, you need to offer, well, if you ever need, you know, to understand an issue related to, in my case right now, it would be college access, please feel free to call me. I'm happy to talk with you. Or if you have a constituent who's running into trouble doing FAFSA, call me. I can help with that, right? So offer your assistance just as much as asking them for something.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Lisa?
So building a strong relationship with a lawmaker, it does start with sometimes your homework, like Michelle had indicated. Get to know that person a little bit through whatever means possible. Find a commonality between you and this person, even if they have strong beliefs that oppose your strong beliefs. Find something in common with them, and you know, be complimentary when you first engage with them. As Patrick mentioned, those Tyler, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Those coffee hours, the things that happen in your district are so important, you know, but they will remember you, not by your name, your title, who you're representing, but a story. They will remember the story. So make a story, as was already explained, and keep it brief, tight. Keep to your bullet points, but they will remember you as the one that knew the someone or the one that did the something. They will remember that. They might not remember your name or anything, but believe me, when they see you again, they will know who you are because you brought that story to their attention. And that does build a relationship. And one thing I've come to learn after a couple of decades of advocating is that however you first meet them, and you don't have to go big like the governor or state representative, but start local with your city council, city commission, your county, you know, elected official, your board of trustees for your community colleges, or, you know, just start small, you know, and go to your township meetings or your city council meetings, and or at least watch them. You know, they're on YouTube. You know, just watch them, and because these people who are sitting in these what seem to be minor elected positions aspire. A lot of them aspire to be something bigger, like your state representative one day, or like your state senator. So it's really important to get to know them at their beginnings. And they will always remember you for the story you brought them.
Yeah, Lisa, I just want to comment on that. I think a story is unbelievably powerful, and 2 years ago I had an opportunity to testify in front of a joint House and Senate Labor Committee, and I had 3 minutes to talk, and I was one of 24 people who spoke that day. And I just told a story about a teacher we weren't able to retain because we couldn't pay her enough, and she was the teacher for my own son's classroom. And a couple weeks ago I was in Lansing, and I don't remember his name, but a legislator came up to me and he's like, I remember your story from that, you know, testimony. So the stories create the connection. So it really, I didn't even think of that. That's a really good point. Thank you. Laura?
create relationships with their staffers.
Yeah.
Do not ignore the staffer.
Right.
Because there's gonna be times where they're called into committee or something happens, they're not available, and you're like, I really just wanna talk to this representative. Know the power of the staffer, who are also aspiring one day to be in some of those seats. So creating those relationships, because they do take the time to hear, they take the time to provide the information, they will highlight and uplift whether it's your ask, if you're, you wanna help support a bill, or keep them informed, but the staffers can be your best friends. And I have found that in my relationships, just, acknowledge, because sometimes people wanna step over them to get to the other person, but they do have a lot of power and persuasion in terms of what they're making sure they put in front of that representative. And again, building that respect and relationship in terms of finding out, doing your research about who they are, what are their interests, what committees they sit on, and also, don't be afraid to go across the aisle. Sometimes we go where we feel comfortable, but we have to talk to the opposition, whatever that looks like, right? And you may not convince them right there in the moment, but you're planting seeds. So don't be afraid to cross the aisle to build relationships. We may not see eye to eye, but we can have a civil conversation, hopefully, right? We're gonna have a civil conversation because we do have to plant seeds. And as everyone said, reference back to, as a constituent or your constituents in the community, we have some commonality. So look for the common spaces across the board, which, may not feel comfortable, right? But sometimes we have to live in that uncomfortable space to be able to move things forward.
Thank you, Laura. So I'll make a comment on, this in general. I think, I was at an event last year at the Kellogg Community Foundation, and it was all the nonprofits kind of getting together, trying to figure out how do we tackle this childcare crisis. And Kristen McDonald-Rivet, if you're not familiar with who she is, she was a legislator out of the Bay City region, just recently moved from state to the federal level, and huge childcare advocate, arguably one of the greatest childcare advocates from a legislative perspective in a long time. And she was on screen and she said, it's amazing how challenging childcare is and how little we hear from people. Mm-hmm. So the first step is just letting your voice be heard,
Yes.
right? Reaching out to those representatives. And Matt Giller can confirm this, as he was previously an elected official. He's like, you wouldn't believe how many people we just don't hear from. Mm-hmm. We know it's a challenge, but no one contacts us. So the first thing is just being there, making a phone call, sending a letter, showing up to their office, joining events. It's more impactful than it may seem sometimes. And then also, like, whatever area you're in, legislators are also always looking for good press, right? Typically, their goal is to get reelected. So we invited, my House Representative is Tom Kuntz. We invited him to one of our centers. I got a little press talking about some challenges we were facing. He got some good press visiting one of our sites, and then I cut that article out, put it in a frame, and said, thanks, Tom, we appreciate your support, and mailed it to him. And if you walk in Tom Kuntz's office, it's right there, the first thing you see, right? So little things like that really go a long way, and every time he walks into his own office, he sees that and remembers how much of a challenge childcare is. So sometimes it's just thinking out of the box. Sending a letter is always a great thing. We love getting cards in the mail, so but no matter what, just being there and advocating is a great step in the right direction.
Ty, can I have one last thing?
Please do.
Don't be afraid to take a parent with you.
Mm-hmm.
Take a family member. And we do a lot of talking with our families about advocacy and self-advocacy and how to share your own story. There's power in those individual stories. They will say, okay, here's Laura from the Children's Center. She has the agenda, related to the business or the agency, which the business is helping children and families. But taking a family member, a constituent, who whatever the issue is impacting one way or the other, have them share their story. Prepare them to, and parents want to share stories. We, if we're parents in some form or fashion, uncles, aunts, grandparents, what have you, mentors, but have them share the story, because it's very impactful, because they're a constituent and it's directly impacting them. So there's a lot of power in that unification, that collaboration as you, as a provider in whatever field and who you're servicing.
What a perfect segue into my next question. So, advocating, a lot of times you feel like if you're in a meeting one-on-one, it can be a little deflating and it feels like you're beating your head against the wall. I guess what keeps you moving forward as you're facing that resilience as you're advocating? Patrick? Or Michelle, would you like to go first? We'll give Patrick a
I feel
second.
Michelle being ready.
I'm ready, I'm always ready. Okay. So for me, it's about making sure that I connect with the people that I'm advocating on behalf of on a regular basis. So obviously right now I'm working in college access, and last week, after a terrible week of losing our AmeriCorps members that did college advising in all of our schools, I had the opportunity to attend 2 different sessions. One was with students and one was with parents. Well, both sets of parents with them. Anyways, I have been running this program for a long time called College Ambassadors, and we train students who are rising seniors to become basically advocates for college access amongst their peers. So we run them around all over the state and take them on tours, and we said we were gonna do it again even though we lost all of our capacity, right? We weren't gonna quit. And so I got to spend last week with 25 students and their adult person, and I was like, this is exactly what I needed, because I was reminded that these are the people that I really actually work for, right? And so when things are so complicated and we could all, despair and just wanna stay in bed all day long, get out there, right? And if you spend time in the Capitol regularly and you don't go connect to the community, you're missing the way to connect the dots, but also to re-engage your energy as you go forward. So, that will help me and sustain me through the summer, because it's not gonna get any easier, but at least I know I'm gonna have all these great teenagers that I'm gonna be hanging out with once a week, so.
Thanks, Michelle.
So, having an ask and always having some fresh material helps. But there are some issues that you might be advocating for that you may have to be a repeat offender. You're constantly asking the same thing, because it does need to be asked. But also, wherever you are, your leadership might change, and take advantage of those first-time freshman legislators. Most of them develop some cause that they advocate for. And when I really started advocating on a higher level, it seemed like every legislator was behind human trafficking. And for many, and some of them still are, which is a great cause. But I had a senator look me in the eye and said, I think what you're saying, Lisa, is really great, but I'm already too loaded with human trafficking right now. And my heart just sank, because they were willing to help sign on to some bills that we were, presenting, as possible laws in our state, but they said, I can't sign them. I've got too much on my platter, so we really were hunting high and low for maybe a new freshman lawmaker on the state or Senate side to be this advocate. And you really do have to educate them, and stand on your soapbox and let them know, what the ask is. It's and sometimes what your original ask was, and when you go back, it might look slightly different because you've learned more, you've obtained more information, but also letting them know, if you know other legislators are on the side of this, maybe suggest that they reach out to their colleague or collaborate and reach over to the other side of the aisle. Some of them still believe in that, And it is kind of like a risk in a sense, but also you just don't know the limitations either, you know? So it's better to say you try and then rework your angle if it doesn't work the first, the second, or third time.
Thanks, Lisa.
And to kind of wrap that up, you know, when you're talking, whether it's on the local level, the state level, if you don't know something, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't have the answer right now. Let me follow up with you because I want to make sure I give you, because they'll say, well, what's the data on this? And you know, it's like, oh goodness, you know, there's tons of data, right? What do I pick? What data point? So don't be afraid or don't get tripped up if they start to try to ask questions that you can't answer. Don't feel that you have to make anything up or pressure to say something. Be honest and say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that now. Let me come back. I'll make sure I'll follow up with you and X, Y, and Z, who the staffer is, right? And I'll get you that information. So sometimes they try to trip you up, and I found that one time, and I was like, I got this. But be cool, you know, as my colleague says, you know, you don't have a lot of time, but it is okay to say, I don't know, but I'll get back with you, versus being pressured to say something in that moment. Because we're not trying to create a negative exchange. You know, sometimes they'll try to trip you up, especially, again, depending on what side of the aisle you're on.
I got a new line for that one when they
What
push
is
on us. It's called, don't reduce our values to metrics.
Yeah.
I wrote that down and I was like, that is really
That's-
good.
yeah,
I'm gonna put
that's
that one
right.
in the
I
output.
love it.
That was great.
Really stuck with me. Can I share really
Oh,
quickly?
please.
I would echo what Michelle said about when it becomes really challenging as an advocate, which it can feel like daily sometimes lately. But I go to the good in the work that I do, so that means going to the people that I'm representing or the people that they're representing, because we kind of are, we serve practitioners who then serve the people. And so I go to those spaces. That's where I get refueled, knowing that what I'm doing is doing good for people that need it, and I want to see those people. I want to see their faces. I want to hear their stories. So I always go, like Michelle said, it's like my visceral reaction is like go back home and go back to the people and communities that I'm representing and hear them and see them, be reminded of why I'm doing this. And then the second thing is to find or have some really good peers that are also in this space and recognizing that you're not alone in this advocacy work. Even peers, I think Laura was mentioning that are not even like in your maybe wheelhouse, but like you just know are great advocates in their community. Having someone that you can just kind of, yes, commiserate with a little bit, but just enjoy a nice meal together and be like, we're doing good work, we're doing good things. That is really powerful to have 2 to 3 of those core people in your community or across the state if you're involved in other collaboratives, that you can just rely on and just always just be like, hey, I need a cup of coffee. Do you want to get together? Do you want to do that? I know that's how Michelle really, you know, mentored us when we were involved with all the work at Michigan's Children, where she would say, let's go out for coffee. Let's meet for breakfast. That turned
5 hours
Yeah,
later.
from 30 minutes to 5 hours. So those are some advice. Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, I do have a couple more questions I can ask, but we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure if there's any questions out there for people who are getting ready to go advocate or, you know, just have any questions for the panel. I want to give you an opportunity to ask those. Anybody? Yes.
I think I have one about that quote with the values into metrics. Just how do you balance that? Because I know that lawmakers and a lot of policymakers do speak in metrics. So like, how are you balancing standing on your values while also speaking the language of metrics to maybe push things along?
Well, I will just say that, you know, mention your data resource, you know, and encourage them to look into that website or that organization or report or, you know, whatever it was where you got this data from. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I didn't cut you off.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We always go in with a one pager, so
Yeah.
that we'll have some data on it, because you do want to do your homework, right? You do want to try to do as much homework as you can, but you can't remember every data point and reference where they can find information from. 9 times out of 10, again, their staffer, they know. But if you're going in for an ask, say to support a Senate bill or what have you, have something with you that you can leave behind that may touch on that, and just reference that. You know, I'm gonna leave this information here with you. There's some data on here. you can see at a glance. And not 3 or 4 or 5 pages. One page, maybe front and back, that's it. You get any more than that, it's gonna be filed in T. So, T for trash.
And just know you can always follow up.
Yes.
Right, if they throw you a curveball, say, hey, this is something I wanna make sure I get you accurate information, and you'd be, not very many, people say they'll follow up and they don't. So the fact that if you say you will follow up and do that, that really gives you a lot of credit with lawmakers, showing like you're very serious and you have really good information. But great question. Any other, yes?
I first want to thank you all for the phenomenal advice that you all have offered. I guess I have a question, because I've been doing advocacy professionally, I would say for maybe 2.5 to 3 years. And I guess all the things that are happening currently in the climate is just unprecedented, right? So I'm really curious to know, what are some ways that you are managing your self-care, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm just curious to know, because I feel like compared to other jobs, people are able to shut off work and to home, and I feel like in this industry it kind of bleeds over. So I guess I'm just curious on like maybe some tactics I could probably weave into my life. If you have any advice or wisdom?
To kind of merge yours with the previous question is, I'm in the space of education and college access, but I also think the work that we all do in this space is blank is a public good. The work that we're doing is publicly good. It's good for everybody. The benefit, the challenge we have is trying to put metrics around it because we want to show that value. But the value of the work that we all do is almost immeasurable. We can totally not measure the totality of it. It's generational. It's in the self-confidence, the self-efficacy of the people that we're working with and the families that we're working with. And so in those times, I'm reminded that what we can do is continue to spotlight those stories. And so maybe we need to show a different aspect of the story. And so maybe our original call was to say we want to highlight the fact that this community has been underrepresented or marginalized. That is still the mission, right? I'm not going to ever get rid of our values to meet a certain metric. But perhaps we also, at the same time that we're doing that, highlight the fact that this benefits something else that a lawmaker is interested in, right? They're interested, it's almost like their attention's over here. Squirrel, it's over here now, and I want to get them over here. It's like, I can highlight the fact that what this work is, let me tell you, it's almost like a game, a little bit. You tell me this, I'm gonna tell you this plus this, because I'm gonna match whatever it is that you say, or you're gonna counter argument for me, I'm gonna tell you that actually I have the solution for the problem that you have. And I in those times I get a little fiery or a little testy around it, because I just think everything that we do, I can probably find an answer for whatever challenge that you're trying to put up in front of me and the people that I'm representing. Because actually, I think collectively we're smarter than what's happening.
Yes.
So that's how I get motivation. It's like, all right, how can I answer the question that you're asking? You're posing me a bunch of questions because you want to challenge my thoughts and you want to kind of shut me down. You don't want to hear what I have to say anymore. Well, I'm actually going to come back with extra resources, extra information, better stories, different people, and I kind of redouble my efforts in that way. And then I'm sure another set of questions will come. Well, you didn't think about this. All right, I didn't think about that this time, but next time it comes to you, I'm gonna bring more resources, more data, more people to talk about that. We can't stop that work.
You'll probably hear from all of us that you can't really shut it off. So you have
That's
to,
true.
on the one hand, yes, you do have to take care of yourself. So like I go pull weeds, that's what I do. I don't know what I do in the winter, I just curl up for a while. But I think when I get really frustrated as an advocate, I start to go gimmicky, and that's just me. But quite a few years ago, I'll use a childcare story. You probably know which story I'm gonna tell. Anyways, our governor wanted to get rid of child daycare licensing. And he, of course, had children the same age as mine. His wife and I were together at an event. We were hugely pregnant at the time. She had triplets, I only had one. But anyway, he wanted to get rid of child daycare licensing. Well, I'm sorry, dude, your kids go to the same licensed child care providers as my kids do, right? So we came up with a gimmick, and we had rulers, and we sent them all over the state, and we asked childcare providers and parents to send back their rulers decorated by their children. And then we taped them all together, and we had 2 football fields worth of rulers, right? And being the advocate that I am, I knew how to book the steps of the state capitol, and we rolled one set, not both sets, one set of those rulers down the steps, and we held a press conference. And, you know, did our shtick, but then we rolled them back up again, and we had our little red wagon, and guess what we delivered to the governor's office?
Rulers.
Rulers. It didn't take too long before we got his attention, and he realized, maybe I better not get rid of child daycare licensing. So, you know, instead of a protest, right, with signs or whatever, that was our version of a protest. So just be creative, have fun with it, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing.
Well, I can tell you from experience, just 24 hours ago, I and Adam and a few other advocates for kinship care, we had numerous appointments with lawmakers across the street in the Capitol, and just hydrate yourself, self-care. You know, they have refilling stations inside of the Capitol, but if you did not bring something to fill, there are no water fountains, you know, or drinking fountains, you know, they're all the fillable stations. But stay hydrated, because I had 1 senator and 6 or 7 state reps that we went into their office. We actually spoke to 3 state representatives yesterday, and I'll tell you, after about the 3rd visit, I was not shy about putting my hand in their candy jar to grab a you know, yeah.
I love those
And the highlight was one lawmaker had chocolates. You know? So, but you know, just take care of yourself. Wear comfortable shoes. You know, bring a bottle of water with you, and you know, and just have those few sentences to get that conversation going.
For me, with self-care, I have learned you do have to turn off. You have to find a way to do that. So as I'm here in the conference, earlier, my CEO was saying, Laura, the House passed, you know, a big beautiful bill, and it's like it's constantly happening, right? The information, it's information overload, because I can get a text, I can get an email, I can get a Teams chat, I can get, you know, smoke signals now, and it becomes overwhelming. And I'm someone, you know, I would sit in front of the news and I'd watch everything, and it becomes consuming. It can consume you. I remember the first election of our current administration, that the election day was my birthday. I'm excited, I'm like, and by the end of the, you know, I'm sobbing at the end, and the immediate depression went in, you know, because I was like, oh dear God. But I had committed never to allow that to affect me that personally. It does affect us personally, but to the point the anxiety, and that's, you know, my personal story, just in terms of how it hit. So you have to find some time to say in your day, and I carve out in my day, it's at least 15 to 30 minutes in the middle of the work day that I'm not in front of the computer. I turn this over, and I'm outside. I take a walk, or I sit in my car if it's raining, because you do have to turn this off, because right now we have information overload 24 hours a day, and currently there's something going on every hour, it seems like. So in order to take care of yourself, build in spaces for yourself, just to say, you know, I need to take a step back from all of this, hydrate, go for a walk, try to tune it off, because it's so much. And listen to yourself, listen to your body. When it becomes so much, you know, say, hey, today's not a good day for me to look at this. I can't right now. This is so impactful. Be honest. Be honest with yourself and others, because there's so much to keep track of now. And then you have to recharge, because again, we can't sit back and not. We have to, you know, we need to continue, but you can't pour into an empty cup. Someone said that. You know, right now we can't pour into an empty bowl. So recharge first, turn it off, find those spaces and places
I'll just end with this quickly. It never gets easy.
Yeah.
It's never gonna be like, oh man, we're winning every day. Like, life is always hard. And something that I try to do to combat that is, there's a saying, you know, the healthy person wants 1,000 things, the sick person wants one. So practice gratitude, right? I mean, I have a healthy family and a business that I love going to. Just think about those things that you're grateful for when you're having those down days, because it never gets easier, but it's important to reflect on the things that matter and, you know, understanding what you've been blessed with. So let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you everybody for coming to this session, and get out there and advocate.